Let us discuss transportation. The nutrients and gases that are taken inside an organism are transported via an elaborate circulatory system, both in plants and in animals. Now let us discuss about transportation in human beings. We know that by the process of breathing, oxygen is inhaled by the lungs, and in the alveoli, the gases are exchanged. Now this oxygen which is inhaled or taken inside the alveoli has to be transferred to all the available cells in the body. This process is done with the help of blood. Blood is the fluid connective tissue. Blood comprises of a fluid which is called plasma, in which are dissolved cells. Now this blood helps us in transport of carbon dioxide, nutrients, nitrogenous waste in dissolved form, as well as oxygen. Now the capacity of blood to carry oxygen is because of the presence of a wonder molecule which is called hemoglobin. Hemoglobin has very high affinity for oxygen, hence it rapidly combines with oxygen and transports oxygen throughout the body. The gaseous exchange between the alveoli as well as the surrounding happens with simple diffusion, and this simple diffusion is not sufficient enough for the blood to carry the oxygen throughout the body. Herein comes the complex organ which is known as heart, which helps in transportation of blood. Heart is a muscular organ which comprises of 4 chambers. On the left side, we have the left atrium and left ventricle, and on the right side, we have the right atrium and the right ventricle. Now these chambers are separated by valves. From the lungs, the oxygenated blood is carried to the heart on the left side by pulmonary veins. This oxygenated blood enters the left atrium. As it enters the left atrium, it expands. When it contracts, it pushes the blood into left ventricle. The left ventricle, which collects the blood, now expands. When it contracts, it releases the blood via aorta, which flows throughout the body. Aorta branches into arteries, and these arteries further branches into smaller veins and capillaries and reach throughout our body and form an extensive network through which this oxygenated blood is transferred to each and every single cell in the body. Once the oxygen is transferred to the cell, in return the blood takes in carbon dioxide, and now it becomes deoxygenated blood. Now this deoxygenated blood is carried back to the heart by superior and inferior vena cava. This blood gets collected in the right atrium. When the blood collects in the right atrium, it expands, and when it contracts, this blood is pushed into the right ventricle, which results in the expansion of right ventricle. Now when the right ventricle contracts, it pushes the blood through pulmonary artery back to the lungs, where the carbon dioxide is expelled and in turn oxygen is exchanged. So in this entire process, the blood passes twice through the heart. Hence this process is known as double circulation. Let us discuss about arteries, the blood tubes. Arteries are the vessels that carry oxygenated blood from the left part of the heart to the organs and tissues. Arteries are thick walled because the blood which emerges from the left side of the heart comes under high pressure. Hence the arteries are thick walled. The arteries, when they reach a particular organ or a tissue, further branches into smaller capillaries so that it can reach all the individual cells in that particular organ or tissue. Since arteries have to deal high pressure of the heart, they are thick walled and elastic, whereas capillaries are very thin and delicate. Can you imagine what might happen if a capillary breaks? The blood might ooze out and flood the surroundings. To prevent them, there are specialized cells which are known as platelets. As soon as there is a break or a rupture in a capillary, the platelets immediately appear in that area and block the flow of blood into the surroundings. Now this process is called blood clotting. The deoxygenated blood from the tissues and organs are taken back to the heart by veins. Apart from the circulatory system, there is another system which is known as the lymphatic system, which is also involved in transport of cells and materials inside the body. Now, lymphatic system comprises of lymph and lymph nodes. From the capillaries, minute quantities of plasma, blood cells and proteins leak into the intracellular spaces of the tissues. This is called lymph or lymph fluid. Unlike the blood, the lymph is colorless and contains less amount of proteins. Lymph drains into lymphatic capillaries from the intracellular spaces, which merge to form larger vessels and which finally form lymphatic veins. Lymph carries digested fats from the intestine and it drains excessive fluids or cells from the intracellular spaces into the blood system. Now let us discuss transportation in plants. We had earlier discussed that in plants, via photosynthesis, complex sugar molecules like glucose and fructose are synthesized. Now this is done with the help of carbon dioxide, water and minerals. Carbon dioxide moves inside the plant tissues simply by diffusion and through stomata. But the plant requires water and minerals which has to be taken in. Again, after the photosynthesis, the product of photosynthesis like complex sugars are to be transported to various parts of the plants. Now these two systems are done by conducting tissues which are available in plants. These conductive tissues, one is known as xylem, the second is known as phloem. Xylem is responsible for transport of water and minerals throughout the plant body, whereas phloem is responsible for the translocation of food materials inside the plant body. In the roots, when ions or minerals are absorbed from the translocated from the surrounding soil, this causes a change in osmotic potential, as a result of which water enters into the root cells. Now this water which has entered into the root cells has to be transported up to the uppermost tip region of the plant. This is done via an elaborate system of tubes or networks of vessels and tracheids or xylem vessels, which form a continuous chain from the root to the stem to the leaf. Water cannot move by simple diffusion because it is going against gravity. To a certain extent of height, with the root pressure, the water is translocated upwards. But after that height, there needs another motive or driving force which can take the water further upwards. Now this is done in plants by a process known as transpiration. Transpiration is the process in which from the leaves through the stomata, water vapor is continuously released out in the atmosphere. Now this creates a vacuum in the xylem vessels. As a result of this vacuum created, the water is pulled up. Now this is known as transpirational pull, wherein the water moves upwards because of the transpiration process which happens in the leaf. When the food is synthesized in the leaf, it has to be transported to other parts of the plant like fruits, seeds and growing buds. Now this is done with the help of the conductive tissue known as phloem. Phloem comprises of companion cells and sieve tubes. This complex sugar or glucose and fructose, which are synthesized in photosynthesis, are to be loaded into these phloem vessels with the help of ATP. Now, when these phloem vessels are loaded with sucrose, the osmotic potential of these cells change, as a result of which water is absorbed from the surrounding cells. Now, this water helps in translocation of this synthesized food materials from one cell to another throughout the plant body. Now, this is the process, or these are the two conductive tissues which are observed in plants. One is xylem, the other is phloem.